So this last week, I was reading through the blog and I saw an article in there by Randy Alcorn. Now, Randy Alcorn wrote a pretty good sized book on heaven. And if you haven't read it, you might want to pick that up sometime. But somebody had written him a question and asked him, said, okay, you're talking about what heaven's going to be like, but what about right now? I don't see you talking about that much. So he delved into that some, and he got my interest going. So between what I read in his article, and then I dived into scripture just to see what I could see about what it would have to say, I thought I'd go ahead and tackle that this week. And so what I'm going to ask today is what's happening right now with those who've gone before us. Now, I want to start out and say that we don't know a lot. Obviously, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, we look in a mirror darkly. We don't see things very clearly. And so having said that at the beginning, the understanding is there's a lot of things we don't know. But having said that, I think God's given us some glimpses that I want to look at today. So just a few questions here, if you'll bear with me. And first one would be, well, okay, where is heaven? Well, it's a good question. A lot of people, what would they say? Yeah, up. And you think about how Jesus, he ascended up into heaven. But was that more just of a visual for those guys so they could realize, yes, he's gone and he's not going to be coming back soon until he does come back in all of his glory? So where is heaven? How about this? Think about this for a moment. A lot of scientists, they talk about string theory. Scientists at Yale and Princeton and Stanford and other places, and somebody said that they were talking about 10 unobservable dimensions and likely an infinite number of imperceptible unknown universes. And if you watch science fiction TV, television shows or movies, you've seen where there's been alternate realities and alternate universes and all that. The interesting thing is that why is it that they're so willing to entertain that, but yet they scoff at heaven? How about this thought that heaven is if you will, another universe, another dimension? Now you think about through Scripture, how many times do you see angels all of a sudden appearing, and then they disappear, or even God taking on human form back in Genesis, whether it would be with Abraham and other times in Judges with Gideon and so forth, where he appears and then all of a sudden he's gone. How is that? Well, again, I'm not saying I know, but I think it's an interesting thought to think of heaven as just, it's another dimension. And it is a real place. It's not just a fabricated thing. It's real, and it's right now. In Acts chapter 7, when Stephen, when they were about to stone him, it says that he looked up into heaven and he saw Jesus, and he saw him at the right hand of God standing there. Elisha in 2 Kings 6, the enemy had surrounded his house, and his servant was just dismayed about what are we going to do. And Elisha responded to him and said, those who are for us are much greater than those who are against us. And he said, God, open his eyes. And his eyes were open, and he saw the army of God surrounding that whole place. The point being, they were there already. He just couldn't see it. He didn't have the eyes. So we don't have the eyes right now, the physical eyes to be able to see those things. Now, someday we will. Right now, we don't. And so unless God sometimes supernaturally just opens our eyes to see it, we're not going to see it. But it's there, and it's real. And it is right here in that sense. So, where is heaven? Okay. Here's another question. What is it like? Well, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about being caught up into the third heaven. And he says, and I know such a man, he's talking about himself, tongue in cheek. And he says, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows how he was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which is not lawful for man to utter. Of such a one I will not boast, yet of myself I will not boast except in my infirmities. And so he says he got caught up into paradise, and he said, I heard things I can't even, he says, not lawful to utter. And I want to be just saying, there's no way to describe it. There's no way to explain what I saw. We do know that the word paradise, and Jesus talked to the thief about being in paradise that day. So paradise came from an old Persian word that had to do with a beautiful park. And so the best way that God can help us in our limited understanding is to tell us it's just like being in a beautiful park. Sometimes maybe you've been to a place where it's just like, man, this is just so beautiful and it's so relaxing. And that's the visual that God gives us. It's temporary, this dwelling right now, because it tells us in Revelation 21 that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And God is going to talk about the New Jerusalem coming down and coming on earth. And so there is going to be a permanency there that's not there right now. But whatever it is, whatever it's like, it's incredibly beautiful. And here's another question. What's it like for those who are there right now? Well, again, Paul said in 2 Corinthians there, he says, man, it's indescribable. Whatever it's like, it's incredible. It's beautiful. It's right now. Acts 7 again, when Stephen looked up and he saw, this is something that's happening right now. It's there right now. And what about what's their form like now? Well, sometimes we think of, like a disembodied spirit hovering around and sitting on a cloud and playing the harp or something like that. Come on. In 1 Samuel 28, it talks about how the witch of Endor Saul had gone to a witch, to try to get a seance going. And the thing is, it really happened. And it says that Samuel came up. And the interesting thing was that it said that Saul said, what does he look like? And the witch described him, and he knew immediately it was Samuel. How would he know it was Samuel unless he had the same appearance that he had, at least in some way, before? In Matthew 17, it talks, that's on the Sermon on the Mount, not the Sermon on the Mount, I'm sorry, when Jesus was transfigured on the mountain before Peter, James, and John. And it says that Moses and Elijah were there. They appeared, like we were talking about earlier. They appeared, and the disciples knew who they were. How did they know? In Luke chapter 16, it talks about Lazarus and the rich man. You know who they are. And talked about Abraham, being able to know who Abraham was. Here's the thing, and Alcorn alluded to this, and I think he's right, and there's some kind of a temporal physical form, and it's not like the resurrection body. They're looking forward to the day when the trumpet sounds and when the dead are raised, and they're going to receive the resurrection body that they don't have yet. But whatever it is, they do have some kind of it would seem like a temporal physical form of some type that they're recognizable. Here's the thing that really gets me too when I think about this, and this is so hard to imagine. They're sinless. Now, I know you know that, but think about that. Think about the people that you know that have gone on before. They were believers, and they're in heaven now. But it's hard for us to imagine them being sinless, being freed from the stuff that weighs us down here on this earth. I think of a lot of people I've known, and, I knew they were believers, but I tell you what, there was some really interesting things in their lives, so to speak, whether it be, sin. And it's hard to think about that person as being sinless. But that's what they are. They don't have to they're not bearing the burden that you and me, we're bearing this right now. We bear the burden of every day of living in this body of sin. But someday, when we do die, we're going to be like them. We're going to be sinless. And that's an incredible, beautiful thought. What about, do they know what's going on down here? Well, Moses and Elijah, they were talking to Jesus about what was going to happen, the passion that was going to take place. In Revelation 6, it talks about martyrs who were saying, Lord, when, and that's key, when are you going to avenge us? What does that seem to say? Well, that they at least has some concept of what's going on down here. So does your loved one know what you're doing or what's going on with you? I don't know. Again, Scripture is not very clear on things like that, but it certainly does seem to be evident that at least they have some knowledge of what's going on down here. And they have things to do. Revelation 4 talks about the elders. What do elders do? Oh, they rule, and it talks about the worshiping. God has given them things to do. And they're learning, and they're growing, and they're understanding more and more. It's beautiful. They're anticipating the resurrection and the end of days. And here's the big thing is they're with Jesus. And with Jesus, it means joy. That's what Paul talks about in Philippians 1 when he says, it's far better for me to depart and be with Christ. So we know that they're fulfilled, that they're enjoying the fellowship with the Lord, and it's going to be a beautiful thing to be there. So when do we go to heaven? When we go to heaven, when does that happen? Well, 2 Corinthians 5:8, absent from the body, present with the Lord, instantaneous. Luke chapter 16 again with Lazarus. It says that when he died, he was immediately carried up to heaven. Jesus told the thief on the cross, he said, today, he didn't say, someday, he said, today, you'll be with me in this beautiful park, this paradise in heaven. So my last question here, who is in heaven? Who's in heaven? John 5:24 says, truly, truly, I say to you, Jesus said, he who hears my word, believes in him who sent me, has everlasting life. He shall not come into condemnation, but is already passed from death unto life. Revelation chapter 20 talks about a book of life. And it says that anyone's name not written in that book, they're going to be cast into the lake of fire. And that's an awful thought. That is hell. And hell is everlasting departure. Hell is a place without hope. But those who have put their trust in Jesus, and I hope you have today, if you haven't, call upon his name. Ask Jesus to come into your life. Ask him to save you. He promised you, if you would call upon his name and ask him to save you, he'll do it. It's just that simple. So I hope you're going to be in heaven too. I hope you've made that decision. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul told the Thessalonians, he says, some of you all, and I'm paraphrasing this really heavy, but he said, some of you all, you've had loved ones gone before, and they've died. But it says, yeah, it's okay to weep, but we don't sorrow like those who don't have hope. So, because we know that even though they're absent from this body, they're present with the Lord. So it's not an end of our relationship. As Alcorn would say, it's only an interruption. So maybe you have lost somebody. It could be a child. It could be a parent. It could be a husband, a wife, a close friend, somebody that was near and dear to you. Understand it's okay to grieve. But we have hope. We have hope in Jesus that with those who have known the Lord, it's just an interruption. It's just a temporary time. And in the scheme of eternity, it's nothing, is it? So there's people I'm looking forward to seeing. I think of my friend who just passed away, I guess it's been about a year and a half ago, Alan Bartlett. Looking forward to seeing him. Looking forward to seeing my mom. Looking forward to meeting Ravi Zacharias and Billy Graham and Elizabeth Elliott and so many of these godly people that we have an eternity to get to know better. So what's going on in heaven? A lot. And it's great. And we're looking forward to that day when we can be with the Lord. And I hope that describes you too. So, in the meantime, you have a blessed week. Thanks.